Well, here we are once more. This is Doug Langdale,
This is Candie Langdale.
and we are doing Cartoon Insiders with Doug and Candie.
I'm Candie.
I'm the Doug one.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. And so today we were going to talk about
Turning down the gain on the microphone a little bit.
Did I blow it out?
Oh, just my ears.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I keep saying I want to talk about 2D versus CG, but it really shouldn't be versus.
Yeah.
It's a comparison.
I mean, they're not fighting.
No, they're not having a cage match. It's 2D and CG. And
Yes.
there are two things that are used to achieve the goal of the illusion of movement.
Yeah.
Yes. For those who don't know what animation is. And there are weirdly heated arguments that happen. Like it's not that unusual to hear it stated as 2D versus CG. Because people do get worked up about it, but
Yeah, but people get worked up about things.
they do, and I mean, you get used to things being done one way, and then all of a sudden they're done another way, and people can get upset.
Well, there's just a lot of emotional attachment to things.
Yes,
It's sort of like the arguments people get into about where the best pizza is. The best pizza is the pizza you like.
Yeah.
And the pizza you like is probably the pizza you grew up with.
yeah, I'm really not sure. I'm always puzzled by those arguments because you can't, like, if someone says they like one pizza better than another, you can't. Are you telling them they don't?
Right.
Like,
right. No, you don't. You don't like that.
It is literally a matter of taste.
But it's like the cheesy bread at the Smokehouse, which is a restaurant in Burbank that's like across the street from the Warner Brothers studio.
Yeah.
And I wasn't telling you. I knew you knew.
I was a,
Okay.
I was. It was a supportive. It was a supportive. Yeah.
Okay, so you get bread, and then it's like orange cheese powder and some oily substance on
Yeah.
it, and then it's baked or whatever.
It's not
grilled.
dissimilar to Kraft macaroni and cheese powder.
And it gets you just in that umami spot on your tongue.
Yeah.
And it's either delicious or disgusting. But
Yeah.
like a lot of people in Burbank love it because it's the cheesy bread.
Yeah.
And it's you have a fun time at the Smokehouse and you eat the cheesy bread and it's good. And then people come and they're like, "Oh, I've heard all about this cheesy bread." And then they have it and they're like, "Oh my God, what the hell is that?"
Yeah.
It's like cheese powder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's sort of the emotions that hit and your expectations going in.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the first time I went to White Castle. It's like 20 some years ago.
Yeah.
I went to Chicago for the first time with my friend Kathy, who was from there. And she's like, "Oh, you got to have White Castle. It's so good." And while I'm eating it, which it was slimy and
Yeah.
yeah.
It was White Castle-y.
Yeah. And she was started telling me how, oh yeah, you call them sliders because they slide right through you and they make you poop.
Okay.
So that's my association with the word slider, and it's
Nice.
nasty.
Yeah.
And I, having White Castle for the first time as an adult, when you go in with these expectations of hearing about it forever and people talking about how great it is, and you think you're in for this big treat, and then you get this slimy little thing.
Yeah.
Not knocking them. I eat them on purpose whenever I'm in Chicago. But it was just that first time. It's like, what is this?
It's a little bit like if I talk about how much I loved Hong Kong Phooey as a kid, and you watch Hong Kong Phooey now, you're going to be like, what?
Yeah. A lot of stuff, it's really like the time and place.
It had to hit you at the right time in the right way.
Yeah. And something is always a reaction to what came before it.
Yes.
So it's like when you go back and watch stand-up comedians from 30 years ago and you're like, this isn't funny at all. But it's like at the time it was hilarious because it was new. It was, so everything is relative.
Yeah.
So I try not to get too worked up about things.
And CG, you know, I mean,
Oh, that's right. We're not
yeah,
talking about food.
we, we, uh, one thing I do want to say is I don't like to say 2D and 3D because it's all 2D.
Yes.
You know, CG, we've been doing this long enough that we remember when CG was kind of novel. It was,
No.
yeah,
Oh my God. I remember I must have been in eighth grade, ninth grade, round in there, 85.
yeah.
Yeah. The Money for Nothing
Dire
video.
Straits, yes.
Yeah. Oh, because I watched MTV
Yeah.
endlessly in the early 80s. And yeah, that was mine. They did that with computers.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine had some videos a few years later. I think was it called Mind's Eye or something?
Yeah, yeah.
It was like
I think
compilations
so.
of CG shorts.
Yes.
And we would just watch that with our mouths hanging open,
Yeah.
like, what is this sorcery?
Oh, so you might have seen Sunstone back then. Because I think that was in one of those
Was that one you
compilations.
showed me a little while ago?
Yeah. We just rewatched Ed M. Schwiller's Sunstone, which
Let's
is
just sit here and have a conversation, you and me, talking about something nobody can see or know what we're talking about.
It's early experimental computer animation, 1978, and it's simple and it's pretty and it's weird.
Is that one you showed me that looked like graphite pencil drawings?
Yeah, kind of,
Yeah.
yes. And so I was surprised. We did a little bit of research for this, and the first use of computer animation in film was in Vertigo in 1958. So
That was a long time ago.
it's been around for a while, but I mean, the kind of thing that we're talking about, like early examples, are the Dire Straits video.
Right. And they used it for the robot's point of view in the original Westworld.
Yes.
When Yul Brynner was the bad robot.
Yes.
I
And
loved that movie.
Last Starfighter was early CG. There's a little bit in Star Wars. There's like a wireframe of the Death Star.
The original. Yeah.
So you know, I mean, they've been using it for various stuff for a while.
The Black Cauldron and the Great Mouse Detective.
Yeah.
I remember the Great Mouse Detective was one that my son had to watch over and over for a while.
Well, those were the first Disney features to use CG. Yeah. And it's sort of debatable which was first because they were working on them at the same time. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working on the Aladdin series, I think that was the first show I worked on that did some episodes digital ink and paint. Mm-hmm. So we were trying that out. It was still hand-drawn, but and I believe they were hand-drawn on paper and then scanned. Mm-hmm. And then all the ink and paint was digital. So you got it was pretty good. You got a nice, like, polished look from that. It was pretty flawless.
Was there a concern back in the day that the computers were going to take everyone's job?
Oh, yeah. CG eased its way in with the digital ink and paint. Eased its way in, I think with the lip sync timing. And it took some jobs. It created a lot of jobs, but it took some jobs. And, like, for instance, virtually all of the TV animation work went overseas by the, I want to say 80s. And El Tigre was the first show that I worked on where there were episodes that were animated in the U.S.
Wow.
And that was a Flash show. So it was 2D, but it was...
Where was it animated?
Sort of computer animation. 6 Point Harness. One of the animators at 6 Point Harness was Eric Bauza, who voiced the dad character on El Tigre, White Pantera. So I had never experienced that before, where the guy who voiced the character was animating the character.
Amazing.
It was crazy. But yeah.
So what's he doing now?
He's everything. Pretty much Is there a show that doesn't have Eric Bauza in it at some point?
The real question is, has he tried the cheesy bread at the smokehouse?
You know what? I bet he has. I bet he has. It's a Hollywood tradition. Okay, it's not technically Hollywood because it's Burbank, but it's Hollywood.
Yeah.
In the larger sense.
In the spiritual sense.
Yeah.
I'm concentrating so hard on not turning my head because Doug and I are sharing a mic right now because
Yeah.
I broke the power supply on my mic. And I sent it to a friend who is an electrical engineer. Anyway, I noticed in some of the previous podcasts,
Yeah.
I kept turning my head to look at
Oh,
the iPad,
yeah,
and
don't
then
do that.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was really terrible. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Now there's a very narrow range where
Yeah,
your face mouth has to be for
yeah. So
these.
I'm like concentrating
Yeah.
so hard on not moving my head. It's hard.
I'm totally focused on cheesy bread now. So what were
I
we actually
know.
talking about? 2D CG.
Yes. El Tigre was animated in LA.
Some episodes,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So I mean, it was weird because it was like, oh, computers are going to take everyone's job, and then not too far into this computer revolution, from my perspective, suddenly jobs were coming back to the U.S.
Right.
And now, a lot more stuff is done, at least on this continent, than was before.
Well, when I was at Titmouse, you would see the people sitting at their
Yeah.
computers animating.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, it was super cool. I mean, the features, there was always a ton of feature work done here, but in TV, we just got used to overseas. It's going overseas, and it's going to be done there. Occasionally Canada, but usually, like, wasn't even that much, like on Darkwing. I know we had Kennedy in Canada. I can never say it. Kennedy was a studio in Canada that we used, but there wasn't that much done in Canada. It was mostly overseas, and we got so into the habit of saying overseas that we referred to Canada as overseas.
If you want to go the long way around.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they were a little reluctant to try the digital ink and paint, although I think the features by that time were digital ink and paint. But we tried it on Aladdin, and it looked good.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? A lot of shows, like The Simpsons, were very slow to adopt that. I think they did a digital ink and paint show and didn't like how it changed the process, so then they didn't try it again for a long time. But they are digital ink and paint now.
It's hard to change your process.
Yeah. And also, the thing that's happened is that the line between 2D and CG is very blurred now. Because most 2D, like the last 2D show that I did, I think was Cleopatra in Space, and that was done in Harmony, I believe, which is a 2D animation program. And a lot of you're sort of building a digital character, but it's flat. But like you can animate it almost like a paper cutout, so it can move, parallel to the camera, but not turn. But then you can attach bits of animation that you can go to, so you can turn the head and stuff. So it has a lot of elements of CG, but
Well,
it looks like 2D.
did that in the Beauty and the Beast feature.
Yeah.
When like it was like CG camera movements
Yeah,
down
yeah.
through the chandelier.
Yeah,
and
but the
stuff.
characters were 2D animated on top of the CG backgrounds. And you see a lot of that. There's a lot of, CG vehicles and CG backgrounds and stuff. Even like Family Guy has had CG cars and planes and stuff like that, because it's hard to turn around, like rigid mechanical objects
Yeah.
in 2D animation. And if you want it to look super smooth, it's going to be CG.
For sure, Z's.
I mean, like famously in Bambi, to turn the stag's antlers required an entire team and a massive amount of work.
That must have been cuckoo.
It was insane. I mean, it's the kind of thing that we don't do anymore now,
Yeah.
because getting the perspective on those things smooth and perfect like they did was a massive effort.
Your mother can't be with you
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, no, it took a crazy amount of work, and now we'd just be like, we're not, we're not doing that. Hand that over to the CG people.
Yeah.
And then, the other thing is that CG shows often have 2D elements to them. There are things like, like in some of Jorge's stuff, like in Book of Life, some of those characters don't really quite work in 3 dimensions. Like if you turn
I
them,
don't.
if you turn them, you have to switch models. It's just like when they first did 3D models of Mickey Mouse, they had to figure out how that ear turn works. Because when you see him from the front, his ears are on the side of his head, and then from the side, like the 3/4 view, it's a weird, one ear gets bigger and one gets smaller, and it sort of moves on top of his head. And figuring out how to animate that in 3D was a big challenge. And Jorge loves to have characters who look kind of 2D in CG animation. So they'll have, like in Maya and the Three, what was her name? The witch character with the gigantic nose. Like that
The
nose.
Grand Bruja.
Yeah. That nose didn't really work in 3 dimensions.
But it was an amazing
But
nose.
it looked
You
fantastic
could not
in CG.
get rid of that nose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and additionally, like, in Puss in Boots, we used to do a lot of cheats where we couldn't afford to build something in 3D, CG rather. So we would just do a paint over. So they would do a very detailed painting of a motionless thing and treat it like it was a CG object. We just couldn't move the camera or the thing. Or you could move the thing like parallel to the camera, but you couldn't turn it. So a lot of times, like if we had to do, like we had to do like a crazy hairstyle for a Puss or something like that, we just would have have it be a held cell. He wouldn't move. He could like blink, but the hair would be a painting.
Right.
So there's a lot of that because I mean, in the end, you want to get the aesthetics right. You don't really care if it's 2D or CG.
Right. Well, it was like Gen in the hospital in Samurai Rabbit when he was in the hospital robe and they wheeled him by, and I was like, we kind of see his butt. That was a paint over because you can't rig a whole new CG character for that.
But because he was moving parallel to the... Is that right? Parallel? Perpendicular?
Sideways.
He was moving, from screen left to screen right.
Yeah.
Not toward the camera, not rotating in any way. Because he was moving side to side like that, we could do it as a paint over and just slide it. So no one had to model his butt.
No,
is the
I
point.
just thought there should be a rhino butt,
You were right.
Yeah.
You can't have someone go to the hospital and put on a hospital gown without doing a butt.
No.
No.
I mean, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. I think that's one of that's one of the rules of screenwriting.
Yeah.
So aesthetically, and then you have things like the Peanuts movie, which we were discussing recently, which some people call 2.5D because it's CG, but they really went to a lot of effort to make it look like 2D.
It was really beautiful to look at.
It looked really great, and they, I believe they actually did the animation on at least 2s, so it was not completely smooth, so it looked more like the cartoons that we were used to seeing. But Snoopy is another character who doesn't really work in 3 dimensions. You have to figure out
his nose,
what you're going to do. And then Charlie Brown, they had to figure out like how his hair works. Like
those 3 lines.
Yeah. Is that hair like is the thing on his forehead is part of his hair, but like do you paint his head hair colored? Like you have to make some decisions. Because these things don't
Sally's
really exist.
hair, she has that big squiggle
Yeah.
up in front.
Yeah, and it's not. It's the front view and the side view are not front and side views of the same shape.
When Charles Schultz was drawing those, he should have been thinking about how it was going to look in CG.
He should have been planning ahead.
But he failed there.
How are the computer people going to handle my drawings?
Yeah.
But I think they did a good job in the movie.
Yeah.
And it's a great look. And then, like the Spirit series was also CG rendered to look like 2D, and that looked beautiful.
Really beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of middle range. I mean, I have to say that I prefer 2D. I prefer hand drawn 2D. And I mean to go further, I prefer the fully hand drawn 2D as opposed to the things where you kind of build a character that you animate in the computer, but it's 2D, but it's sort of like a little puppet. I mean, I do like it better when every frame is a new drawing. It has a certain life to it.
It does.
But a lot of our favorite stuff is CG, so.
I always liked the 2D animated stuff because It looked like a drawing or a painting that
Yeah.
came to life,
Yes.
and that's beautiful. Um, and as a writer,
Yeah.
I prefer it because you get more freedom, you get more locations, you get more characters,
Well,
because it's not as expensive.
and that is an excellent segue
Mm-hmm.
into the other main thing that we wanted to talk about, which is the cost.
Mm-hmm.
So, very often when you're deciding, do I want to do this 2D or CG, it is cost based.
It's like, do I want to get paid?
Yeah. And I mean, the weird thing that's happened, and we were just talking about this earlier, is that 2D television animation has become the go to for adult animation.
Mm-hmm.
And much of the younger skewing animation is CG now.
I don't know if it's true or not, but the studio executives seem to believe that kids prefer CG.
They definitely seem to believe that.
Yeah, I don't.
Like I feel like there's a bias that like if you can afford to do it CG and if it works for the property, you should do CG because
Yeah.
that is going to get more viewers because it feels. I mean, I think the thinking is that it feels more expensive. It feels more complete. It feels
Do you
more
think a little
official.
kid is thinking about
No,
the price?
no,
Like,
not the price, but like
any of that?
I don't think they would be saying expensive, but they
Mm-hmm.
might be saying it looks cheesy if it's 2D.
I'm
And
like,
I don't think a real little kid, and that's why a lot of preschool stuff is still 2D.
mm-hmm.
But there is that feeling, and I don't agree with it. I
Yeah.
don't believe it, but there's that feeling that like that sort of mid range of kids, like 6, 7, 8, 9,
Mm-hmm.
10, 11, 12, feel like it's somehow better if
But
it's CG.
like my son grew up on Disney clamshell VHSs
Yeah.
that were all hand drawn,
Yeah.
and they were beautiful and he loved them.
Yeah.
He didn't suddenly one day start thinking they looked cheesy.
No, but there is a lot. I mean, there's that thing where there's sort of common wisdom that changes over time. Like it
Yeah.
used to be common wisdom that if you had kids in a cartoon and didn't show any adults,
Mm-hmm.
that would make the kids watching anxious.
Yeah.
That you needed to see the parents, that there had to be adults around. Like I had a show that wasn't picked up one time, and the argument was you can't have a bunch of kids and no parents. It makes kids nervous to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought that up like a few years later to a different executive at a different place, and they looked at me like I was crazy.
Yeah.
Like, are you nuts? Like,
Yeah.
they don't want to see the parents.
Yeah.
It's all about the kids. And
No, it's just what
Yeah.
somebody happens to believe and they make it law.
it becomes, yeah.
It's like being in a cult.
It's
It really
very
is.
much.
Like
Yeah.
that cult leader just decides what the rule is for
Yeah.
everyone, and everyone has to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, you do. You get these mandates that come down.
Mm-hmm.
Like at Disney at one point, there was a mandate no coffee because the person in charge was, for I believe religious reasons, thought of coffee as a drug. So they were like, having any coffee, you're doing drug humor.
Oh, but the people working were allowed to drink coffee.
The people
correct?
working
Okay.
were sorry, no coffee in the cartoons.
Oh, okay. It's like, so no work got done?
Which was weird because there was a massive coffee joke in the first Darkwing, and that might have been what instigated this rule. But then, like, there were other like executives that came along later who were like, "No chili, chili isn't funny."
Right.
So there's just stuff like that happens, and like, I imagine I do stuff like that. Now, like, there are things that I don't want to see in something. If
Like
I were in charge,
sliders.
I would be like, no sliders. Sliders don't work in comedy. Let me tell you a thing or two about comedy, kid. That would be me.
Yeah.
That's what I would sound like if I were an executive.
Yeah.
But
Would you smoke a cigar?
I
in
would
this
absolutely.
scenario?
I would
Okay.
smoke, and I would have very short, stumpy fingers for some reason. I would have tiny. My fingers would look like little cigar
Little,
butts, and I'd be holding. I don't know where this comes from.
This is
I have a little
sexy.
cigar butt. This is. We've
What's
gotten.
that baby in the Roger Rabbit show?
Oh, yeah.
That's what I'm picturing.
That is exactly what I was picturing. Yeah, little stumpy fingers with a little stumpy cigar.
Yeah.
I can't remember not Baby Huey. That's a different character.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. But there was some CG in Roger Rabbit, so there you go. But so one of the things is that like for us in particular, I think as creator, writer, showrunner people, it's not even like the overall budget of the show. It's like the character and location budget.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's CG and a main character costs $30,000 and a supporting character costs like $15,000 and a location costs, I don't know, 40 or 50,000, maybe like a fully rendered
Then the
location.
whole show has to take place in one
Yeah.
room, and the characters are just floating in the T pose. And that's the whole show.
So if we want to have more freedom to have more
Mm-hmm.
characters and go to more places, we want the show to be 2D.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it.
Yeah. It just, I don't know. I like the way it looks.
I do like the way it
Because
looks.
you can say that CG looks more expensive and more polished and stuff. And that's only if it's high budget CG.
Oh, yeah.
Because I see a lot of cheap CG.
Yep.
And that looks terrible.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's always a challenge when you're doing TV CG. Your budget is
Yeah.
a tiny fraction of a CG feature budget.
The other part of that with television, you're moving so quickly.
Yeah.
You have to get that show cranked out so fast. You don't get a chance for all the retakes. You can call 100 retakes and maybe they'll have time to do 10 if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And then that was so much more difficult during Samurai Rabbit because, you know, we were doing it during COVID when everyone is like, what's going on, freaking out and stuff. But the animation company in India, they all got hit really hard from COVID. So a lot of people were sick. A lot of people, you know, they missed a lot of work.
Yeah.
They had family members die. Just it was such a tragic experience for them.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be monsters.
Yeah, no, it was.
So in television, you even on a good day, you have to let stuff go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, very often in movies, they will relentlessly work something over and over until it's perfect, and like you said,
don't have that luxury.
You know, let stuff go
in television.
And sometimes, I mean, the best looking CG is they're basically jumping through hoops to get the CG to look like 2D.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like the Hotel Transylvania movies look fantastic, in my opinion, because they're getting that 2D look from CG characters. So like a lot of the stuff in those movies, those are like they basically have built a character for one pose.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can see a lot of the characters, like when they turn to the side, their eyes change position so that they look good in the profile and they look like a 2D character in profile. And then there's a lot of like special poses and stuff like that costs a lot of money. And those aren't even super high budget CG movies. Like they got a lot of bang for their buck out of that. Like kudos to them.
Well,
those
like
look fantastic, and they were mid-range budget.
In Book of Life, choosing to do they're wooden puppets.
Yeah,
that was really smart.
Yeah, and yeah, you know, like one of the things in Book of Life was there was going to be a big water sequence at one point, and water is so expensive to do. It's better than it used to be, but it's still expensive. Basically, they were like, this sequence is going to cost as much as the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah,
and we were like, let's not do that.
Let's take the water away.
Let's do something else so we can spend that. Because there are, I think the first shot of the Land of the Dead in Book of Life was like that might have been a couple of $1 million. Like,
remember how
there's a lot
stunning
in that.
That was to see that on the big screen.
So fantastic. It looks so great.
It's amazing.
I know I co-wrote the movie, so I'm sort of tooting my own horn, but I wasn't involved in that. I
you
mean,
didn't draw it.
It looks amazing. And they, you know, you want to have the money to spend on things like that. That, you know, the money shot, you know, that is really gonna.
Who designed that shot? Who was?
I don't. There's so. I mean, you know, Jorge obviously was supervising it. But yeah, I don't know.
We
I don't
should,
know specifically. Yeah. Well, if we can find out, we can note that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know.
Yeah. No. No. I know.
Was it Paul Sullivan or was it that other guy? Is
Uh,
my question.
I think it was Paul, but I'm not sure.
Okay, we'll look.
Yeah. So, I do love it when people go out of their way to get CG to look like 2D.
Mm-hmm.
But part of it is like, it's just because I really love 2D.
Yeah.
like,
yeah.
And I would like to see more 2D. There haven't been a lot of 2. I mean, Klaus is the only sort of high profile 2D feature I can think of recently, and then I mean all the what's the Irish studio that did Secret of Kells and
yeah,
those,
I was thinking of that too. That was really
I'm blanking
beautiful.
on their name, but their stuff is amazing. That stuff looks great.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean those are good examples of using there's computer technology obviously involved in this, and I'm sure they're digital ink and paint. I mean, like, I don't know if does anyone draw on paper anymore?
I do.
But for the like actual animation drawings,
Oh, no.
that must be an
I have
extreme
no
rarity.
patience.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment
Yeah.
to talk about our brother stop motion animation,
Yes.
which
Which is
amazing.
I mean, the most visceral form of animation,
So
probably.
where does the budget come down on stop motion in the hierarchy?
I have not been involved enough in stop motion. I would assume that, well, one thing, I would assume that it depends on what you're doing. That it could be comparable to 2D and less than CG, but like I mean, like the Leica features are not only extremely elaborate stop motion animation, but they extensively use computers in the process because they'll build the heads and the mouths separately, and they switch out the mouths for each pose, and then they have to digitally remove the line because you can see the seam where they connect on most of the characters. They have to digitally remove that, but they also will do stuff like what I mean. I swear, the people at Leica are like, what is the most difficult thing we could do that's virtually impossible? And then they will do that. Like, they really challenge themselves.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and Kubo and the Two Strings had that, like, the largest stop motion character ever built.
Oh, that's right.
It was, I don't remember how big, it was like 30 feet tall, and they were animating it a frame at a time. It was crazy.
Think that we could get Max Winston to guest on our podcast?
We should ask him.
Yes, he gave us a tour of his studio.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
It really was.
It was magical.
Yeah.
He did that Daffy Duck
Yes.
short.
Yes.
Yeah,
Daffy and Wacky Land. Yeah. Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked with him years ago on a project that unfortunately didn't move forward.
That was amazing.
But it was great, and he is a genius. I would love to have him on.
Stop motion is very magical.
Yeah. It really, I mean, stop motion, I think more than any other kind of animation, really feels like you just brought something to life. Like, you can see that it is an inanimate object, and it's moving around. It's crazy.
I think I like it because it gives me the feeling of being a kid playing with my toys.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's one of the reasons I love specifically claymation, which, I mean, very often people use the term claymation to refer to things that sort of look like clay, but they're usually wireframe models with latex skin and so forth. But like actual animated clay figures, that, for me, like having played with clay a lot as a kid and like having worked with clay as an adult, is visceral in the fingertips. Like you can and you can see the fingerprints.
Oh yeah, sometimes you can. Yeah, that's fun.
It's I can't
like Gumby or something.
I can feel the work of the animator's hands watching it. And yeah, like the early Gumby where it was genuinely clay. I think they were using wire models later. I think I said wireframe earlier. I don't mean wireframe like computer generated. I mean,
or wireframe glasses.
It's got like I mean, it's got a wire skeleton that it's built up on. Yeah, I mean the early Gumbies are, they really have that feeling of like someone had some clay and some toys,
Mm-hmm.
and they just started playing around.
It's really fun.
Yeah. So
I should find my old stop motion things I did with my Play Doh.
yes,
I made some vegetables and made them run across my living room.
I took a stop motion animation class
Mm-hmm.
in summer school.
How old were you?
Probably 15 or
Mm-hmm.
16. But like I was in Massachusetts for the summer, and I went and took some classes at Newton North, I think it was, high
Mm-hmm.
school. And I like made a short stop motion film. I wish I had a copy of that. I wish I had access to that.
Where do you think it could be?
I doubt that a copy exists.
Oh.
Yeah, and I did other stuff. I mean, I just did like claymation in my room and stuff when I
Mm-hmm.
was a kid. I mean, I had a Super 8 camera and I would just make things. None of that stuff exists.
That's too bad.
It is too bad. Oh well.
Oh well.
I will tell you that you're not missing much.
Oh.
But I mean, I would like to
It would
see
be
it.
charming to have.
It would be, yeah, it would be neat to have it, but I don't think any of that. If it were found now, I think it would be dust.
That's
So
true. Huh?
I only hope that it hasn't burst into flames. They weren't using nitrite film at that point, were they?
I don't
No,
know.
no.
Okay.
But I don't know. It could exist somewhere, but I sort of doubt it.
Hmm.
So, in a perfect world, our next show, well,
You know,
you can never answer that really, can
we
you?
often don't have it. The decision's not ours. We show up and we're told what it's going to be.
The decision is never ours.
Yeah.
We
So.
we can make arguments, but
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and the other thing is like, you know, I say I prefer 2D. They definitely are projects that we've worked on that we've been presented with where we're like, well, obviously that has to be CG.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you have to suit it to the project.
Very, very much so.
I would love to do another 2D show. Though.
Yeah,
Let me just say that.
That would be really sweet.
That
I
would-
would like to also.
Yeah, that would be super cool. But I mean, there are just different, you know, there's different pluses and minuses, and there's different aspects to the process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like there are animation stages. Like there's the layout stage in. I may get this terminology wrong because I'm not super involved ever in this step, but the layout stage in CG means something completely different than 2D layout, because there's an early stage of the animation where the characters are just sort of plonked down into their positions, don't typically have lip sync, sometimes aren't fully rendered, sometimes they're in their T pose, which is the generic character pose that most characters are built in with their arms out to the side, hence the name. And where you just sort of look at it and say, do these shots work? You know, is this gonna cut together? Does it feel like the character exited frame in the right direction and entered in the right direction? You know, it's that stage, which you don't even do anything like that. You do pencil tests, maybe in 2D, and they're not really pencil anymore, but you still
Right.
call them that. You know, and you do like tests of walk cycles and run cycles and things like that. One of the differences in CG is if you do a walk cycle or run cycle, like that's genuinely the cycle you're going to see. It's that exact thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to, okay, here's your reference to draw from. It's like, no, those are the exact movements that you're going to see.
Yeah.
So you really want to get it right at the beginning. One of the things that this is something I think Jorge said one time. We keep saying Jorge. We're talking about Jorge Gutierrez. That's clear, right?
The Jorge.
The Jorge. Jorge said one time that one of the things that happens when people are designing on the computer is they do like one drawing of a character that they like, and they just keep copying that drawing and pasting it and reworking it. And he said that he feels like you lose something because if you design a character on paper, you're drawing the character over and over and over again, and you start to perfect and finesse, and you start to find like, oh, this, you know, the arc of the nose kind of connects to the arc of the cheek here, or the, you know, you find things that you don't find when you just draw a character on the computer once and keep copying it. So he was saying that he felt that people should design physically on paper first, or at least keep drawing the character over and over on the computer rather than
I
just
can
drawing
see
it
how
once.
you would really stumble upon magic during
Yeah.
that process.
Yeah, you do, and I mean, like, I'm not a designer, but I've designed characters, and when you're physically drawing them, you know, you're usually drawing that 3/4 view over and over and over again. You do start to go, oh, it works better if I cheat this eye this way, or it works, you know, the mouth is funnier if it moves a little over to the side. You know, you find stuff like that that you don't tend to find when you're just drawing on the
Yeah,
computer.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think, do we have an opinion on the future of 2D and CG
Well, I hope that they both remain available and viable
Yeah.
for us, and stop motion.
and stop motion? I'm sorry, I keep. Well, I mean, we were discussing 2D and CG, but stop motion. Like, I would love to see more stop motion. There was kind of a boom a little while ago, and I don't know where that's at now, but I would love to see more.
I wish there were more.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing.
It really, it has a. I think one of the things about it, I want to say that it has certain limitations, and overcoming those limitations is a thing that
That's
can really
that's where
lead.
the magic is.
That's where the magic comes from. I mean, all of these media, all of these
Medii
different
is-
forms of animation have their own pluses and minuses. But like when you come up against a wall and you have to find your way around it, that is very often where the best stuff
Yeah.
comes from.
Just put Henry Selick in a big room with a bunch of toys and let him
Yes.
go. Yeah.
I want to see Henry Selick Gumby.
That would be amazing.
Yes,
I would love that.
he is a wizard.
He really is.
He even looks like a wizard.
He's a wizard.
He's a magician. Love to see more Henry Selick. And actually, Wendell and Wild has a lot of that stuff where it's obviously a 3D character. It is physically really built in 3D, but he achieved a 2D vibe. So sometimes the characters have those poses where it's like a sort of like a flat face made in 3D. You can't turn it, but it's just a funny, interesting look. He did a fantastic job with that. I just love that kind of thing.
Yeah, me too.
Now I feel like an idiot earlier for saying, like, no, there isn't really any 3D animation. Obviously, stop motion is 3D.
Oh, yeah.
We're not seeing it in 3D, is the
Yeah,
point I was making.
Yeah, it's when we are saying 3D, we don't mean you put on glasses and it pops out of the
Right,
screen, because
yeah.
that can be confusing.
Yeah. And I would argue that even that is not really 3D. What you're getting a parallax view of the screen, but you are not physically able to focus on one object over another. That's one of the reasons that some people get headaches from 3D films.
Candie gets headaches.
Candie gets headaches.
During 3D films.
I sometimes get headaches. Yeah. And sometimes just doesn't work for me. Like, I mean, it works in that I can perceive the 3D, but there's something about not being able to change your focus from one object to another that I can get very frustrating for me. So
yeah, I don't care for that.
Well, there was a time when it seemed like 3D was going to be the future. That was another one of those mandates.
Yeah, well, you know what irritated me was when you would go to the theater and then you had to pay like an extra $8 for the glasses to wear. So then next time I would come back and bring the glasses with me.
Yeah.
Nope, you can't do that. You have to buy another 8 or 10 whatever dollar pair. You can't bring the ones from last time. And I was like, this is just a cash grab. You guys can screw off.
Well, that was one of the reasons that they were pushing 3D, was it had an extra revenue stream.
You get all these glasses at the $10,000% markup for the little piece of plastic.
No, that was one of those things where someone decided that 3D was going to be the next big thing. And they pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. It was like ShowScan was another one.
What's ShowScan?
I think that was what it was called. It was 60 frames a second instead of 24 frames a second. And for various reasons, it's too complicated to get into. A lot of people just didn't like the way it looked. It people perceived it as looking more like video because it was so crisp. And they sort of missed the little bit of grainy blurriness that you get in 24 frames a
It's
second.
like when your meat is the wrong texture.
Yeah, it was unfamiliar, and a lot of people didn't like it, and it didn't really take off. And there's still, I mean, I think there are games that are, I think, done in 60 frames a second. Like your eye can perceive more than 24 frames a second.
Yeah.
And don't get me into frames per second, because I'll go off on a hole. Because the film is 24 and video is 30, but it's not really 30, it's 29.97. The whole system is insane.
I would coax more of this out of you, but I'm kind of hungry now. And
Well,
like some cheesy bread.
I think we're in the wrapping up phase.
Okay.
And we would like to see more of the physical media as opposed to the computer
I would.
media.
Yeah.
But we love it all.
It's all great.
Yeah.
And there are times when stuff needs to be CG.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And there are times, and obviously there are elements of stop motion and 2D that use the computer extensively. So.
Yeah.
But I would love to do another 2D project. I would love to see more 2D.
Me too.
And more stop motion.
High five.
High five. There we go.
We did it without missing.
We successfly high-fived.
Because we're sitting a foot away from
each other.
it's
because we did both right hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That has gone wrong so many times.
So many high fives to the face. Alrighty.
Alrighty.
I think that'll do it for now.
Yes, thank you for listening. And so we are on 17 podcast platforms now.
We're everywhere.
Apple Podcast, Audible,
Spotify,
Amazon, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and I've been putting them on YouTube with graphics, and I don't know how important that is.
I think we've come to the conclusion that if there's something that you really feel like adding information, do it, and if not, don't.
The first ones, I was adding little snippets of information and comment to the graphic because, I don't know, I felt like it.
Well, part of it was in the first few, we kept going, what was that guy's name?
Yeah.
That one guy.
What was he in?
Yeah.
And then the most recent one, which was the first one we did after talking about, like, Doug's
our careers,
background.
Yeah.
I didn't feel inspired, but like I don't know if people will miss that, if they care. I watched pop-up video in the 90s, so I thought it was cool. But because it is a lot more work. I can edit just one graphic in like 5 minutes, or doing it with all of the millions of comments and stuff takes hours.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it's worth it. So if anyone has any input on that, and
what I'm getting is that if anyone feels like they're really missing all those notes, don't tell us because that's hours of work for you.
I'll do it if people like it.
I don't know. I mean, I can help.
Yeah. So
I didn't help, by the way.
I just need to remember to face the microphone.
Yes.
Maybe get another microphone and.
And you want to give our Instagram?
Yes, it's Doug and Candie Langdale with underscores.
And Candie is
underlines.
Yeah.
Under between the words.
Candie is Candie.
Remember how carefully we would do it before?
Yeah.
And now it's like, whatever.
Too lazy.
You can find it.
You'll figure it out. All righty.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.